The destruction of the One Ring at the fiery depths of Mount Doom marked the ultimate defeat of Sauron, the Dark Lord who had terrorized Middle-earth for millennia. As the ring melted away, so too did Sauron's physical form and power, leaving many to wonder. Where did Sauron go when the One Ring was destroyed? Was his essence truly obliterated? Or did it retreat to some dark corner of the cosmos? In this video, we will explore the fate of Sauron after the ring's destruction, diving into the lore of Middle-earth to uncover what might have become of one of its most infamous figures. To understand the fate of Sauron after the One Ring was destroyed, it's crucial to delve into the nature of his power and the significance of the ring itself. Sauron was no ordinary being. He was a Maya, a member of a race of powerful immortal spirits created by Eru Ilúvatar, the supreme deity in Tolkien's legendarium. The Maya were lesser Ainur, angelic beings who existed before the creation of the world and helped shape it. Sauron, originally known as Mairon, was among the greatest of the Maya, noted for his intelligence, cunning, and desire for order and perfection. Sauron's fall began when he was seduced by the power and ideology of Morgoth, the first Dark Lord, who sought to dominate and corrupt the world. Under Morgoth's tutelage, Sauron became a master of deceit and treachery, slowly falling deeper into evil. After Morgoth's defeat at the end of the First Age, Sauron took up his master's mantle, becoming the Dark Lord of Middle-earth. However, Sauron's power was not inherent or invulnerable. Much of it was bound to the physical world, particularly through the creation of the One Ring. The One Ring was Sauron's most ambitious creation, forged in the fires of Mount Doom in secret. It was designed not only as a weapon of control over the other rings of power, but also as a vessel into which Sauron poured a significant portion of his own strength and will. This act was both a source of immense power and a critical vulnerability. By binding so much of his essence to the ring, Sauron made himself immensely powerful as long as the ring existed. However, it also meant that his existence and his power were inextricably linked to the fate of the ring. This act of binding his essence to a physical object made Sauron's immortality dependent on the ring's survival. The One Ring granted Sauron dominion over the other ring-bearers and extended his influence across Middle-earth. It amplified his natural abilities, making him nearly invincible while the ring remained intact. Yet, it also created a paradoxical situation. While the ring was the source of his might, it also became the key to his potential downfall. Sauron's power was no longer fully his own, but shared with the ring, making him vulnerable in ways that other Maiar were not. This profound connection between Sauron and the ring set the stage for his eventual defeat, making the destruction of the ring synonymous with the destruction of Sauron's power. The moment of the One Ring's destruction is one of the most pivotal events in the history of Middle-earth. When Frodo Baggins, against all odds, brought the ring to the fires of Mount Doom, he was unable to let it go, as the ring's power and allure overwhelmed him. However, fate intervened in the form of Gollum, whose obsession with the ring led him to bite off Frodo's finger and seize the ring for himself. In his ecstasy, Gollum slipped and fell into the fiery chasm, taking the ring with him. As the ring was engulfed by the flames, it was unmade, and with it, the power it held over Sauron was shattered. At the exact moment of the ring's destruction, a cataclysmic reaction occurred. Sauron's physical form, already reduced to a shadowy figure after losing the ring long ago, was utterly obliterated. The Dark Tower of Barad-dûr, the fortress of Sauron's might, which had stood as a symbol of his dominion for centuries, collapsed into ruin. The armies of Sauron, bound to his will through the ring's power, were thrown into disarray and defeat. The Nazgûl, Sauron's most powerful servants who were bound to the ring, were consumed by the flames of Mount Doom as their master's power evaporated. The destruction of the ring not only annihilated Sauron's physical manifestation, but also severed his connection to the material world. Without the ring, Sauron could no longer exert his will or influence over Middle-earth. His vast reserves of malice and power dissipated into the void, leaving him as nothing more than a faint, malevolent whisper in the shadows. The loss of the ring, the very heart of his strength, meant that Sauron could no longer take physical form or project his will as he once had. His defeat was absolute, and his presence in Middle-earth was reduced to a mere memory, a shadow of the terror he once was. Despite the destruction of Sauron's physical form, the question remains: what became of his spirit? As a Maya, Sauron was an immortal being, created by Eru Ilúvatar, and thus his essence could not be fully destroyed in the conventional sense. However, the loss of the One Ring inflicted a catastrophic blow to his spirit. The ring had been the vessel of much of his power and will, and with its destruction, Sauron's spirit was left in a state of impotence and fragmentation. Tolkien's legendarium suggests that the destruction of the ring did not entirely erase Sauron's existence, but it left him in a state of extreme powerlessness. His spirit, no longer bound to the physical realm or capable of influencing it, was rendered into a form of exile. Unlike Morgoth, who was cast into the void by the Valar after his defeat, Sauron's spirit did not face a formal banishment. Instead, he was left to wander as a formless, weakened entity, unable to ever again take shape or wield any significant power. Sauron's spirit, now bereft of its primary source of power, likely became a disembodied force of malevolence, too weak to manifest in the world. This state of existence would be one of profound torment for a being like Sauron, who had once wielded so much power and had sought to dominate all life. His spirit, now a mere shadow, would have been trapped in a liminal space, neither fully present in the world nor entirely absent. It's conceivable that Sauron's spirit lingered in a state of perpetual despair and regret, forever aware of its defeat and unable to act upon it. In Tolkien's mythology, the concept of evil is often tied to the idea of self-destruction. Sauron, in his lust for power, ultimately caused his own downfall. The destruction of the ring was not just a physical defeat, but a metaphysical one. It signified the unraveling of all that Sauron had built and all that he had become. His spirit, now stripped of the physical and magical power it once wielded, was left as a hollow echo of its former self. This lingering spirit, though it may have continued to exist in some diminished form, was effectively neutralized, incapable of posing any further threat to Middle-earth. Thus, the fate of Sauron after the ring's destruction can be seen as a form of eternal exile, a punishment befitting his long history of malice and domination. His spirit, while not wholly obliterated, was consigned to a fate worse than death. An eternity of impotent existence, aware of its past power, but utterly unable to reclaim it. This was the final, fitting end for the Dark Lord, who had once sought to bring all of Middle-earth under his rule. The ultimate fate of Sauron after the destruction of the One Ring has been a topic of much debate and speculation among scholars and fans of J.R.R. Tolkien's work. While Tolkien's texts provide a clear narrative of Sauron's downfall, the specifics of what happened to his spirit after the ring's destruction remain shrouded in mystery, leaving room for various interpretations and theories. These theories range from the complete annihilation of Sauron's spirit to the idea that he was cast into the void, a concept that plays a significant role in Tolkien's broader mythology. By examining these different possibilities, we can gain a deeper understanding of the complexity of Tolkien's world and the nature of evil within it. One of the most widely accepted theories is that the destruction of the One Ring led to the complete obliteration of Sauron's power, reducing him to a mere shadow of his former self. The theory is grounded in the idea that Sauron, having poured so much of his essence into the ring, was rendered powerless when it was destroyed. In this view, Sauron's spirit, though technically immortal as a Maya, was so weakened and diminished that it became incapable of ever taking physical form again or exerting any influence over the world. This interpretation aligns with Tolkien's portrayal of evil as ultimately self-destructive. Sauron, in his lust for power, created the very means of his own undoing. By tying his fate to the ring, he ensured that his downfall would be as total as it was inevitable. Supporters of this theory argue that Sauron's spirit, while still in existence, was reduced to a state of near non-being, a formless, powerless entity adrift in the remnants of its former self. In this state, Sauron would be eternally conscious of his defeat, but utterly incapable of reversing it. This would be a fate worse than death for a being like Sauron, who had once sought to dominate all of Middle-earth. The idea that Sauron's spirit lingers in a state of perpetual impotence fits with Tolkien's broader themes of hubris and the inevitable downfall of those who seek to dominate others. Another theory posits that Sauron's spirit was not merely diminished, but was cast into the void, a dark, empty space beyond the known world. The void, or the timeless halls, is a concept in Tolkien's mythology that represents the ultimate emptiness, a place outside of time and space where the most evil beings are banished. This theory draws on the fate of Morgoth, Sauron's former master, who was cast into the void by the Valar after his defeat in the First Age. Morgoth's banishment to the void was a punishment for his relentless pursuit of power and his corruption of the world. Some fans and scholars believe that Sauron, as Morgoth's lieutenant and successor, might have met a similar fate. However, the idea of Sauron being cast into the void is more speculative, as there is no explicit mention of such a fate in Tolkien's texts. Unlike Morgoth, who was defeated by the combined forces of the Valar, Sauron's downfall was brought about by the destruction of the ring, a more indirect and symbolic defeat. If Sauron's spirit was indeed cast into the void, it would imply a level of divine intervention similar to Morgoth's punishment. This theory suggests that the Valar or Iaryu Ilúvatar himself might have intervened to ensure that Sauron could never rise again. The void in this context would serve as an eternal prison for Sauron, a place where his spirit would be trapped in eternal isolation, unable to escape or influence the world in any way. A third theory speculates that Sauron's spirit was not entirely obliterated or cast into the void, but instead remains in Middle-earth in a weakened and dispersed form. According to this view, Sauron's spirit, though shattered by the destruction of the ring, could still exist as a faint, malevolent presence, lingering in the darkest corners of the world. This theory draws on the idea that evil in Tolkien's world is never completely eradicated, but can be diminished and pushed to the fringes. Sauron's spirit, in this interpretation, would be a ghostly remnant of his former self, forever bound to the places where his influence was strongest, such as Mordor or the ruins of Barad-dûr. This lingering presence would be a shadow of the terror that Sauron once embodied, incapable of rallying the forces of evil or taking physical form, but still a source of fear and corruption. This theory resonates with Tolkien's depiction of evil as something that can never be fully destroyed, but can be diminished and resisted. Sauron's spirit, though weakened, would serve as a reminder of the past, a warning of the dangers of unchecked power and ambition. This idea also ties into the concept of evil as a corrupting force, suggesting that Sauron's influence, though no longer dominant, could still have a subtle, corrosive effect on the world. A more symbolic interpretation of Sauron's fate suggests that his spirit represents the persistence of evil in the world, even after its greatest manifestations are defeated. In this view, Sauron's downfall marks the end of his direct influence over Middle-earth, but the legacy of his actions and the evil he represented continues to linger. This interpretation aligns with Tolkien's broader themes of the cyclical nature of history and the ongoing struggle between good and evil. Sauron's spirit, in this symbolic sense, would be the embodiment of the ever-present potential for corruption and darkness in the world. Even after his defeat, the shadow of Sauron remains, not as a literal presence, but as a reminder of the dangers of power and the importance of vigilance against evil. This theory emphasizes the idea that Sauron's true defeat lies not in his destruction, but in the triumph of the forces of good that resisted him. The destruction of the ring symbolizes the victory of hope, courage, and selflessness over the forces of greed, domination, and despair. In this sense, Sauron's spirit, though it may persist in some form, is ultimately powerless in the face of the resilience and strength of the people of Middle-earth. This interpretation suggests that the true legacy of Sauron's defeat is not the lingering presence of his spirit, but the enduring strength and unity of those who opposed him. Each of these theories offers a different perspective on the fate of Sauron after the destruction of the One Ring, reflecting the complexity of Tolkien's world and the multifaceted nature of evil. Whether Sauron's spirit was completely annihilated, cast into the void, left to linger as a diminished presence, or interpreted as a symbolic representation of ongoing evil, the end of Sauron marks a profound moment in the history of Middle-earth. It serves as a reminder of the consequences of unchecked ambition and the ultimate futility of evil. In the end, Sauron's fate, like much of Tolkien's work, leaves room for interpretation and reflection, inviting readers and viewers to explore the deeper meanings behind the story and its characters. The defeat of Sauron and the destruction of the One Ring marked not only the end of an era of terror in Middle-earth, but also the beginning of a new age, one where the remnants of his influence would still be felt, and his legacy would cast a long shadow over the world. The impact of Sauron's defeat was profound, shaping the political, social, and cultural landscape of Middle-earth for years to come. In the immediate aftermath, Middle-earth entered a period of renewal and restoration, but the scars left by Sauron's reign were deep, and the echoes of his malevolence would continue to influence the world. The most immediate consequence of Sauron's defeat was the collapse of his vast empire. Sauron's power had stretched across much of Middle-earth, with his influence felt in lands as far away as the Shire. His armies, which included orcs, trolls, and men from the east and south, were formidable, and their presence had long threatened the free peoples of Middle-earth. With the destruction of the ring, Sauron's control over these forces was broken, leading to chaos and disarray among his troops. The armies of Mordor, which had seemed invincible while under Sauron's direct command, were suddenly leaderless and vulnerable. Without Sauron's will to direct them, these armies were swiftly defeated by the combined forces of the free peoples during the final battles of the War of the Ring. The fall of Barad-dûr, Sauron's Dark Tower, symbolized the collapse of his dominion over Middle-earth. The once imposing fortress which had loomed over the plains of Gorgoroth was reduced to rubble, and with it, the central seat of Sauron's power was destroyed. Mordor, a land that had long been synonymous with darkness and fear, was left in ruins. In the years following Sauron's defeat, the land of Mordor was gradually reclaimed and healed. The once barren and desolate plains began to show signs of life as nature slowly returned to the region. The destruction of Barad-dûr also freed the lands and peoples who had been under Sauron's oppressive rule, allowing them the chance to rebuild their lives and societies. The liberation of Gondor and the restoration of its throne were among the most significant outcomes of Sauron's defeat. Gondor, long a bastion of resistance against the forces of darkness, had been weakened and nearly overwhelmed by Sauron's relentless attacks. The kingdom had lost much of its former glory, and its people had suffered greatly. However, with Sauron's fall, Gondor was able to reclaim its strength. Aragorn, the rightful heir to the throne, was crowned as King Elessar, and under his rule, Gondor entered a period of renewal. The ancient city of Minas Tirith, which had withstood the siege of Sauron's armies, became a symbol of hope and resilience, its white walls gleaming as a beacon of light in a world recovering from darkness. Aragorn's reign marked the beginning of the Fourth Age, also known as the Age of Men. With the departure of the elves from Middle-earth, the dominion of men was fully established, and they began to shape the world according to their own visions and desires. The Fourth Age was a time of great change and rebuilding, as the peoples of Middle-earth sought to restore what had been lost, and to forge a new future free from the shadow of Sauron. Aragorn's leadership, characterized by wisdom, justice, and compassion, played a crucial role in guiding this new era. He worked to strengthen alliances between the kingdoms of men, foster peace, and ensure that the lessons of the past were not forgotten. While the immediate aftermath of Sauron's defeat was marked by celebration and hope, the legacy of his reign was not easily erased. The scars of his tyranny were visible across Middle-earth, from the devastated lands of Ithilien and Rohan to the burned fields of the Shire. The psychological impact of Sauron's long shadow could be felt in the fears and memories of those who had lived through the War of the Ring. For many, the wounds inflicted by Sauron's terror were deep, and the process of healing would take time. Communities that had been divided by war and fear had to rebuild trust and solidarity. The free peoples, though victorious, were left with the task of ensuring that such a threat could never rise again. One of the most enduring aspects of Sauron's legacy was the pervasive sense of vigilance that his defeat instilled in the peoples of Middle-earth. The war against Sauron had shown the devastating consequences of unchecked power and the importance of unity in the face of evil. As a result, the leaders of the free peoples, particularly Aragorn, were committed to maintaining the peace and stability that had been so hard won. This vigilance was reflected in the continued watchfulness over the lands of Mordor and the surrounding regions, ensuring that no remnants of Sauron's influence could regain power. The cultural impact of Sauron's defeat was also significant. The stories of the War of the Ring, the heroism of figures like Frodo, Sam, Aragorn, and Gandalf, and the ultimate victory over the forces of darkness became the foundation of a new mythology for the peoples of Middle-earth. These tales were told and retold, becoming part of the collective memory of the Fourth Age. The lessons learned from the war about courage, friendship, sacrifice, and the dangers of ambition were passed down through generations, helping to shape the moral and ethical values of the new age. Despite the triumph over Sauron, the shadow of his influence lingered in subtle ways. The memory of his tyranny served as a cautionary tale, a reminder of the potential for darkness within the hearts of men. The desire for power, the temptation to dominate others, and the fear of the unknown were all elements of Sauron's legacy that continued to challenge the leaders of the Fourth Age. Aragorn and his successors were keenly aware of these dangers, and their governance was marked by a commitment to humility and service, qualities that stood in stark contrast to Sauron's reign of terror. In the Shire, the legacy of Sauron's defeat was felt in a more personal and immediate way. The hobbits who had long lived in peace and isolation were drawn into the wider world by the events of the War of the Ring. Though the Shire itself was largely untouched by Sauron's direct influence, the hobbits' involvement in the war, particularly the journey of Frodo and Sam, had a lasting impact on their society. The return of the hobbits to the Shire was bittersweet. While they brought back tales of their extraordinary adventures, they also carried the burden of the traumas they had experienced. The Scouring of the Shire, an event where the hobbits had to reclaim their home from a corrupt regime, served as a microcosm of the larger struggle against Sauron, reinforcing the theme that even the smallest and most peaceful communities are not immune to the influence of evil. The restoration of the Shire, like the restoration of the wider world, was a process of healing and renewal. The hobbits, under the leadership of figures like Frodo, Sam, Merry, and Pippin, worked to rebuild their homes and their way of life. However, the experience of the war left a lasting mark on the Shire, changing the hobbits' perspective on the world beyond their borders. The memory of Sauron's shadow, though distant, served as a reminder of the importance of protecting the peace and simplicity of their lives. The Red Book of Westmarch, which recorded the story of the War of the Ring, became a treasured document, preserving the history and lessons of those dark times for future generations of hobbits. In the wider world, the defeat of Sauron also had implications for the other races of Middle-earth, particularly the dwarves and the elves. The dwarves, who had long been isolated in their mountain strongholds, began to emerge more fully into the world, seeking to rebuild their ancient halls and renew their connections with other races. The elves, on the other hand, faced a period of transition, with the departure of many of their kin to the Undying Lands. Those who remained in Middle-earth found themselves in a world increasingly dominated by men. The defeat of Sauron marked the end of the elves' long stewardship of Middle-earth, and they gradually faded from the world, leaving behind only their legacy of beauty, wisdom, and sorrow. Ultimately, Sauron's defeat and the destruction of the One Ring marked a turning point in the history of Middle-earth. It was the end of an age dominated by the struggle between light and darkness, and the beginning of a new era where the free peoples were free to shape their own destinies. However, the legacy of Sauron's reign would continue to influence the world in myriad ways. The lessons learned from his tyranny, the vigilance required to prevent the rise of new evils, and the scars left by his long shadow would all play a role in the unfolding story of Middle-earth. In the years and centuries that followed, the memory of Sauron and the War of the Ring would become part of the myth and legend of Middle-earth, a distant but powerful reminder of the resilience of the free peoples and the ultimate triumph of hope over despair. The defeat of Sauron was not just the end of a dark chapter in Middle-earth's history, but a testament to the enduring power of courage, friendship, and the belief that even in the darkest of times, there is always hope for renewal and a better future.